directors who used to represent farmers, and then rose very quickly to be a chairman of the board, used to be the former governor of Migori County, Governor Okothobado. And Governor Okothobado actually worked very hard during this time in the Kenya Sugar Board to be able to establish private millers, particularly the private millers in Homa Bay, that is Ndiwa, the Sukari industry, as well as in the Transmara region, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, the reason why I celebrate this section of the bill is because by rethinking this Kenya Sugar Board, Mr. Speaker, there is a very keen and deliberate effort by the two committees, the committees from the Senate and the committee from the National Assembly, to try and make Kenya Sugar Board be able to make sugar industry commercially viable. Why do I say this, Mr. Speaker? Because for the first time, we are seeing the regulation, development, and promotion of the industry being a function of a board. Number two, Mr. Speaker, we have seen a proposal that this board is also going to coordinate the activities of the value chain actors in the industry. There is nothing that can make the sugar industry as economically and commercially viable as being able to coordinate the activities of value chain actors, Mr. Speaker, because sometimes these value chain actors, for instance, if you think about the jaggery millers, Mr. Speaker, when left to no regulation, to no development, to no promotion, Mr. Speaker, then they cannot be able to make a sense of commercial viability of running good industries. This sugar board also is going to make sure that it facilitates equitable access to benefits to farmers from government. And I'll elaborate on that when I look at some of the proposals in terms of benefit that will come from government to the farmers and as well as the millers, Mr. Speaker. I'm also seeing, Mr. Speaker, that this bill under Section 4 establishes one role of the Kenya Sugar Board as establishing linkages with government agencies and research institutions. For the first time, Mr. Speaker, we are seeing a Kenya Sugar Board proposed to be able to enable that the board will be able to monitor any distortion in the sugar market. I know my brother, Senator Sifuna, was very keen on the levy that he was talking about, the importation of refined sugar, Mr. Speaker. But sometimes, Mr. Speaker, importation can cause a lot of distortion in the market, and we see that Kenya Sugar Board can be able to regulate that, Mr. Speaker. The most juicy part of this, Mr. Speaker, is that for the first time, Kenya Sugar Board will work alongside Kenya Sugar Research and Training Institute under Section 28, 2AB, where Kenya Sugar Research and Training Institute will play an advisory role to the Kenya Sugar Board, Mr. Speaker. We remember that the defunct Kenya Sugar Board, Mr. Speaker, did not have proper scientific basis of being able to develop the industry, Mr. Speaker. I also celebrate the fact that the board has been mandated under Section 33, Mr. Speaker, to establish sugar industry inspectors. Mr. Speaker, this is wonderful. Because if you think the industry that are affecting farmers, Mr. Speaker, is the disconnect between the Kenya Sugar Board and farmers' plight at the inspection level of the entire value chain. For instance, Mr. Speaker, this bill establishes the crop inspector. What kind of sugarcane, what kind of seed cane should a farmer be able to plant? Number two, Mr. Speaker, there is an establishment of factory inspector, Mr. Speaker. One of the problems that farmers face in places like Migori and the southern Nyanza region is that you harvest your cane, take it to the factory, and then when you get to the factory, you are hoping that your cane is weighing so well. Then at the factory, there is weighing machines that have already been doctored in a way that you cannot be able to make the best out of your sugar cane. So, Mr. Speaker, a factory inspector should be able to deal with the problem of farmers in terms of weighing to make sure that they're getting proper payment for their cane, Mr. Speaker. There's also warehouse and transportation inspector, Mr. Speaker, has been established under Section 33. And, Mr. Speaker, this is also fantastic because one of the biggest problems that the sugarcane growers are facing is the fact that things like tractors, Mr. Speaker, have caused a lot of accidents in regions where sugarcane farmers are coming from because there's no inspector to look at the entire warehouse and transportation chain for sugarcane growers, Mr. Speaker, such that sometimes in places like Migori, Homa Bay, Muhoroni, you will find that at night when people are traveling, Mr. Speaker, you find tractors that have been left by different millers on the road because they are in pathetic condition and therefore ending up claiming a lot of lives, Mr. Speaker. So it is wonderful that we are going to have an inspector who can be able to look at that entire chain, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, close to this is Section 38 of this bill, Mr. Speaker, that has talked broadly about sugarcane development levy that is tied together with Section 39 that end up establishing the Sugarcane Development Fund. Mr. Speaker, for the first time, this fund used to be in the defunct Sugarcane Board, but it was not broadened enough to be able to help the plight of farmers. And Mr. Speaker, this one establishes some ways of being able to support farmers when they have planted their sugarcane and they've got contract with millers. And after that, Mr. Speaker, you can be able to benefit in different ways. For instance, Mr. Speaker, I would be happy when Migori farmers are able to get funds in terms of bonuses and loans from different millers where this levy, or rather this sugarcane development levy and sugarcane development fund can be able to allow millers to give them some bonuses and loans. If you think about it, Mr. Speaker, some of these problems that we have for farmers is that sugarcane can take up to 18 months to mature. Between that time, the farmer will have spent so much time in the farm, yet, Mr. Speaker, they have problems with school fee. Sometimes they have got medical problems that sometimes need a lot of money. And sometimes it's so difficult for them to get loans in traditional banks or any other source of financing. If this fund is made to function, Mr. Speaker, they can now go to their millers and even seek for vouchers to be able to take their kids to school as they wait for harvesting, so that at the end of the day when they harvest, they can be able to pay back when they're cut in the price and cost of, in the price and benefit they will get once they sell their sugarcane, Mr. Speaker. There is also a very important function that this will help with, which is what I've seen in Migori County, particularly in Awendo areas and Rapogi areas, where farmers sometimes are forced to cut their sugarcane early and harvest them, then sell them to jaggery millers, Mr. Speaker, because they don't have money. That will allow farmers, this fund will now allow farmers to wait until their sugarcane mature well and be able to give them the best returns. And Mr. Speaker, lastly on this sugar development fund, Mr. Speaker, the hardest part of sugarcane is developing seed cane. Currently in the sugar industry, Mr. Speaker, seed cane is being developed by Calro. And you know that Calro is taxed with many other seed development, Mr. Speaker. We don't have an industry-specific function in terms of helping with seed cane development, Mr. Speaker. This fund, combined with Section 28 and 27, that establishes Kenya Sugar Research and Training Institute, will enable for the first time the sugar industry to be able to develop seed cane for farmers that will be able to make farmers have the best seeds possible. So this is a very laudable section of this bill. And Mr. Speaker, I think that one of the areas that regulations that will be furthered from this bill should look at is the problem of leasing in a more broad way to combine with this idea of the Sugar Development Fund. Because, Mr. Speaker, the idea of forcing millers to lease their milling, facilities, Mr. Speaker, is because there's a number of problems that do come about when there's no proper management, Mr. Speaker. And I think that this fund will help us solve that problem. Because, Mr. Speaker, for you to have a good miller, they use what we call efficiency ratio, Mr. Speaker. The efficiency ratio, Mr. Speaker, is whereby if you put 10 tons of canes and try to crush it as a miller, Mr. Speaker, you must be able to get 1 ton of sugar, Mr. Speaker. That's not a management problem. That's an efficiency problem, Mr. Speaker, that you should not force millers to lease their facilities just because of a management problem, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, another problem that is facing millers with regards to these leasing problems is the issue of pricing. Because the issue of pricing, Mr. Speaker, has always been left to importation distortion of sugar, Mr. Speaker. But the good thing about this bill, Mr. Speaker, is that for the first time, it has established Sugar Research and Training Institute that will be able to help us think about technologies that can be able to think about sucrose content of cane, Mr. Speaker. I think that if this bill goes through, Mr. Speaker, going forward, the sugar industry should not use importation and price of sugar as the price of cane, but should use sucrose content as the tool for being able to price cane for farmers, Mr. Speaker. If you are a farmer from one farm and have got good sucrose content, Mr. Speaker, you should be able to earn more than a farmer who has got less sucrose content, Mr. Speaker. This will deal with the duality problem of the leasing problem because of inefficiency of sugarcane industries, and also, Mr. Speaker, it will help to deal with the general issue of pricing of the cane, the cane prices for farmers, Mr. Speaker. Lastly, Mr. Speaker, I want to laud the fact that this bill has also been able to propose, say, a tribunal to deal with disputes in the industry, Mr. Speaker, the sugarcane industry, Mr. Speaker, under Section 44. Mr. Speaker, the number of disputes that we are seeing in the sugarcane industry, Mr. Speaker, are so many that cannot be left to only functions of other places like courts to deal with, Mr. Speaker. So establishing this tribunal will be able to help farmers where they have got problems with farmers, farmers where they have got problems with millers, millers where they have got problems with millers, Mr. Speaker. Currently, Mr. Speaker, you would know that the issue of disputes is generally being dealt with by Agriculture and Food Authority, Mr. Speaker. But the problem with Agriculture and Food Authority, Mr. Speaker, is that it doesn't have any teeth to bite, Mr. Speaker. But the way this tribunal is structured, Mr. Speaker, it will be able to deal with any overarching issues that might need a tribunal to bite. For instance, Mr. Speaker, the issue of poaching of sugarcane is a major issue, whether you are within the zones that have been prescribed here or without the zones, Mr. Speaker. You'll find that a farmer has entered a contract with one miller, and after entering a contract with one miller, because of pressure of finances, they end up selling their cane to a different miller who they are not within their outgrower schemes, Mr. Speaker. This tribunal will be able to deal with those kind of sugarcane poaching and discipline millers so that millers can be able to develop their own outgrower schemes and make sure that there is sanity for a free market economy in the sugar industry. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, this is a very good bill, and also a very good report that I want to appreciate all the members of that committee that came up with this report, and I hope that we'll fast track the passing of this bill so that the sugarcane farmers in the country can be able to benefit from such a wonderful piece of legislation. Therefore, I support, Mr. Speaker. Thank you so much.
Senator Mungatana.
Mr. Speaker, I want to take this opportunity to really thank you for giving me a chance to also make my comments on this mediated version of the sugar bill. Mr. Speaker, may I congratulate the mediation committee for the wonderful work they have done. Mr. Speaker, this bill has come through both houses. We had our own disagreements, and now we have a version which we can work with. Mr. Speaker, I know that still the Senator of Nairobi has raised another issue there, which was not accommodated in the mediated version, but I still believe that he supported, as I listened, the rest of the clauses that were agreed upon. And maybe, Mr. Speaker, we will need also to find a way to deal with a situation where some really important issues are left out. But on the whole, Mr. Speaker, I think this is a very good beginning towards implementation of the sugar bill. And we will not debate the sugar bill afresh, but support the recommendations of this report. And Mr. Speaker, one of the most critical, in fact, the only issue I would like to, because I've debated this bill before, but the one thing that I loved in this mediated version is the committee observation in Chapter 3. It said, having considered the clauses of the sugar bill, and they named that sugar bill, the committee observed the sugar catchment areas which cover a number of counties. And they said Central covers these counties, Southern covers these counties, Lower Western covers Mumias, Busia, Siaya, and so on. And then they go to coastal area, the sugar catchment coastal area that covers Kwale, Tana River, and Lamu counties, which the committee observed will be used for election of representatives of growers in the Kenya Sugar Board. Because, Mr. Speaker, if this wasn't done, the committee said there is a possibility that counties with many growers may get slots in the board perpetually. So, Mr. Speaker, what was the committee's recommendation? Committee's recommendation was that, having observed the above recommendation, they said that the Cabinet Secretary should put in place regulations after enactment of the bill, providing that the board positions will be rotational among the different counties in the catchment areas to ensure that each county gets a chance to be represented in the sugar board. Mr. Speaker, what this mediated version is telling the country is that now in the sugar board, there will be opportunity for counties that may not be producing as much, but also produce sugar. Counties like Kwale, Tana River, counties like Lamu, they produce sugar. But, Mr. Speaker, every time the question of sugar is discussed, it's like the coast sugar catchment area is not considered. It's like we are non-existent, and yet we do produce sugar. In fact, Mr. Speaker, in Tana River County in Tana Delta, when they did the first tests, they found that we are able to do 2 crops of sugar in 1 year because of our climatic conditions, which are very good, and the kind of sucrose content that our sugarcane produces is high quality, Mr. Speaker. Our conditions are similar to the ones in Mauritius, and everybody knows that one of the countries that produces extremely good quality sugar is Mauritius. In fact, its economy is dependent on sugar production and clothing and tourism. So, Mr. Speaker, going back to the point, I'm saying that this particular report seems to recognize that the coastal region is also a producer of sugarcane. And in fact, it is deserving of a position on the board, the sugar board, so that the principle of rotation is one that is giving us a voice at the highest level, Mr. Speaker, of sugarcane planning, management of the industry. And Mr. Speaker, this is important because the needs of sugarcane farmers in Kwale, in Tana River, in Lamu, is totally different from the needs of the sugarcane farmers in the other sugarcane catchment areas. And it's important, Mr. Speaker, for our voices to be heard at the highest level. This has not been happening in the past. And I am very happy that this mediated version of the sugar bill is inclusive of this rotational principle. Mr. Speaker, those who may not be familiar with the rotational principle, maybe I need to also give it a bit of background, because in the Pan-African Parliament, Mr. Speaker, we used to have universal suffrage for the election of the Speaker, whom we call Pan-African Parliament President. And we used to have, like, anybody can stand. But what happened, Mr. Speaker? West African countries in this continent of Africa are small states. You find Togo, you find another small state there, you find another, and all these have a seat similar to other states. And the principle of parity, Mr. Speaker, demands that every state has a vote. So what used to happen, Mr. Speaker? They just bunch up together, and small countries by size and also by population, they are able to retain that seat on the western part of the continent of Africa. So what did we do? The African Union intervened and said we must have a rotational principle. And this rotational principle operates like this. We divide the African continent into 5 regions, so that we have the northern region, we have the southern region, the eastern region, the central region, and the western region. So if the leadership has emerged from one area, then you are not eligible to produce a candidate for that position. It has to go to the other area and the other area and the other area until we come back to you. And this, Mr. Speaker, has allowed some sense of fairness. So, Mr. Speaker, I'm so happy to see that this rotational principle is being applied in the sugar board elections, so that there will be a time will come when the sugar catchment area of the coast, meaning Kwale, Tana River, and Lamu, will be producing a person to sit at the highest level of decision-making for the sugar board. And this will affect all the farmers, and this will cause all our voices to be heard at the highest level. So, Mr. Speaker, there are many reasons to support this mediated version of the sugar bill. But for me, Mr. Speaker, I think there is structuring of the management, the allowance of the voice of the people from the coast to be heard at the highest level, the innovation that came into the thinking that will allow other parts of Kenya also to be heard on matters sugar, is a very beautiful reason for me to support this bill. And Mr. Speaker, I urge all other members who are going to speak to this bill to support this bill with all the other clauses. But for me, this was the biggest sell point. So I thank the committee. I thank my colleagues who are part of this committee in this mediation effort. And Mr. Speaker, for me, I support this report. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Beatrice Ogola.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I thank you for giving me the opportunity to add my voice to this mediated report. Honorable Speaker, I want to laud one former MP of Ndewa constituency, the late Joshua Orua Ojode, a man who had a vision to think for his community. Honorable Speaker, we are proud of this former and late MP because in Homa Bay County as it is, and then, Honorable Speaker, we had no working industry. The only industry in Homa Bay then was Capital Fish, that was a private company, and it only was concentrated on the fishing sector, Honorable Speaker. So we had an MP who saw it worth that he would initiate work for the establishment of a sugar industry, and that was the birth of what today we call Ndewa Sukari industry in Ndewa sub-county, Honorable Speaker. With this industry, Honorable Speaker, we now had activities, economic activities that our farmers would be engaged in, not limited to our constituency, Honorable Speaker. I happen, Honorable Speaker, to be one of the people that Mheshimiwa Joshua Roa Jode put in place to fight for the establishment of this sugar industry. Amongst them, Honorable Speaker, is the late former chair of the County Council of called Councillor Jane Were. May her soul rest in peace. Credible councillors then, like the then, after Councillor Jane Were, we had Councillor Dorcas Matunga, who was the chair of the County Council of Homa Bay until devolution came in, Honorable Speaker. We had in the team Councillor John Orata, who is alive today and is a testament of that struggle to initiate the Ndewa Sukari industry. We had other outstanding personalities in Ndewa constituency that were put together by this gallant son of Ndewa, Honorable Joshua Oroa Ojode. It was not easy, Honorable Speaker, because then we had to convince communities who thought that with the coming of Sukari industry, they were going to lose their land. Little did they know that the economy of the region would be jump-started. And so we have farmers who have benefited immensely from the Ndewa Sukari industry. Our farmers are able to pay school fees. Our farmers are able to have money in their pockets. Our farmers have been empowered economically, Honorable Speaker. But with this, all these, Honorable Speaker, there have been setbacks also. And I'm happy, and that is why I want to support what is before us today, Honorable Speaker. I want to support because of a few clauses that have been included by the mediation committee. One of them is clause 29. Honorable Speaker, this is a clause that talks about nomination of universities, that they are able to nominate. Honorable Speaker, we all know that universities have a sole mandate of research. And so, if they are able to nominate some of their own, that will bring in issues that are research-related, Honorable Speaker, then, Honorable Speaker, I'm happy with this. One, I would like also the government to also consider increasing funding related to research to our universities. Honorable Speaker, universities are universities because they are centers of knowledge. They are centers of research. So based on the clause 29, Honorable Speaker, I want to support the mediation report. Honorable Speaker, I also want to support the mediation report based on clause 38. That I see, Honorable Speaker, there's the issue of our local roads being addressed by this mediation report. Honorable Speaker, I'm happy that now funds that were going to the Kenya Rural Roads Authority are going to go to the county governments. And of course, Honorable Madam Speaker, I believe that county governments are to the people.